All right, so this knife thoughts video is going to be a review of this knife. And as you can see, this is from American Blade Works. I did a video on another knife from this company, and the owner and pretty much the company, Michael Martin, had sent that knife for review and feedback, and was kind enough to send this knife also. So I like to make sure I mention that I was sent this knife for review and feedback. And let's take a look at it here. So this is the American Blade Works Model 1 V5. And the previous knife was the V3. So that's one of the things that I really like about Michael Martin and this company, American Blade Works, is it seems like he is really dedicated to improving the product and making the best knife that he can. So I'm going to talk first real quick about the V3. So if you've seen my video on this knife, I really like it. I'm a real big fan of this knife. I have carried and used it a lot, and it's got a lot of great features. Super smooth action. I like the machined aluminum handles. I like the custom hardware. I love the design, the super simple and ergonomic handle, and the nice classic drop point, as well as the ball bearing pivot and the ramp detent. All of it makes for a really nice knife that I've enjoyed using. I did have some points of feedback though. One of those being this is less of a practical thing and more from an aesthetic standpoint, is that this screw, as you can see, is kind of in this chamfering, so it sticks out a little bit. Another thing was that on mine, and I don't know if this was something that was in the case on all of the V3s, but the clip sits above the handle. Again, like the clip works fine on this knife, but it's something where, it'll kind of bounce against that, and something that I think someone, might notice. And then the other thing was that when you have gloves on specifically, it's really not a problem without gloves on, but when you have gloves on, it can be a little bit tough to get at this liner. There is a small kind of cutout here to get at it, but you have to come, instead of like across, you have to first come up into this, the blade well, and then push it across. So, like I said, I really like this knife. I still carry it and use it, and enjoy it, but there were just a couple things that I thought could be improved. And like I said, Michael Martin sends these knives. He sent them to some other people also, and as part of, I think his dedication to constantly improving, he made some changes on this V5. So one thing here, you can see that it's not a just two-piece handle anymore. So this was two pieces of aluminum that met in the middle. Now they are scales and a backspacer. This is a custom, backspacer made by American Blade Works. They have different options for the scales. This is G10. They also have some micarta and some carbon fiber. But all of these are still machined. So I did like this kind of, lined pattern here. This one has more of like a 3D machine to it. If you take a look at it here, you can see that there's a little bit of a roll to it, and it is 3D machined. Michael Martin put up a video of that, or sent a video of that to me, and it's the whole thing is machined across there, so it makes it both look good, it has a little bit of a pattern to it, and feel good in the hand. So they did change the handle. The other thing, as you can see, they changed the screw setup, so there's no longer this screw up here. It is just two screws for the handle and then the pivot. And then another thing that they changed is this clip. And I think this is one of those things that was definitely a good addition. The screw is purely aesthetic. The clip, I think, mostly aesthetic, but a little bit practical also. As you can see, compared to the V3, they basically just added, extended that clip a little bit. And I didn't find that it tore up my pocket or anything like that. I found that it was easy to put in the pocket. You can see that it has a slope there to it, and easy to take out of the pocket with the slope a little bit steeper of an angle on that slope, so that it's not going to fall out of your pocket. accidentally. So I was happy with that change here. One interesting thing with the clip on this knife that I mentioned also in the V3 review is that it's not reversible, and because of that, they're able to put the screw actually on the inside of the handle. As you can see, there's no screw on the outside, which gives it a good look. It's a very kind of clean, minimalistic look. Real quick, overall, one of the things that I like about this knife, it's definitely a different style, but one thing that it shares with a custom maker that I really like the designs of is Ray Laconico, the simple, elegant look. And it's a different style, a different application of that, but I think it does kind of have some of that in its simplicity and practicality, really, in the design. Then another thing that they changed here, as you can see, is this this cutout to get at the lock bar. So it's definitely a significant increase in this cutout. So I'll show you next to the V3. As you can see, it keeps the general handle shape, but adds that cutout. And I think that's a good thing. I actually, interestingly, I don't really wear gloves a whole lot for my work or anything like that. But I got to, or I guess I had to wear gloves quite a bit when I was carrying and testing and using this knife, because we got more snow where I am than like in the last 10 years in a couple days. So had to put a lot of salt down and stuff like that. And I found that it was easy to get at this even with gloves, easy to open and close. So I think that this cutout did, help with that. That is, let's see, that's pretty much the changes. Oh, one other change. And this is a change that I didn't necessarily, I didn't notice or I didn't suggest or anything like that. But the flipper tab is shorter here on the V5. So if you compare the V3 and the V5 directly, the flipper tab is both shorter and a little wider. So the V3 doesn't have any jimping on it. The V5 does. And again, it's a little bit wider and shorter. So that's another change there. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But like I said, they kept the machine handles just a little bit different, style of machining. They kept the custom hardware. So this hardware, the screws, the backspacer, the pivot, the clip are all made in-house by American Blade Works, which is really unique and I think really cool. I particularly like this pivot because as you can see, it has this flattened area here at the top. So it's always going to stay with the logo facing, the correct way. And it also is going to make it so that this doesn't spin if you ever need to adjust the pivot, which I did do, and it, worked well. They also kept the really nice, in my opinion, blade coating and hardware coating. So you can see that the hardware is this kind of flat gray, and the blade also has that coating. There's a bunch of oil. This is just mineral oil on this because recently for the new year here, oiled and everything, all my knives. But it has this same gray finish, which I've found to be really durable. I use the V3 quite a bit, and the finish hasn't, rubbed off at all, really. I'm not exactly sure. I'm looking at the product page here right now, and I don't believe that it says exactly what the coating is, but it's a very strong coating. It seems to, stay very well. So I like that they kept that. They also kept the ramp detent, and this is tough to show. See if I can show it here. But right here, you can see there's a small amount of, kind of where it looks like it's been ground a little bit. And that's where that detent ball here, it's going to, once you get past the lock, it slides off of that really easily because of that area on the tang of the knife, the lock bar interface being ramped. So that does make for nice smooth action. It makes it pop open and lock very consistently. So I like that they kept that. Another thing that they kept overall is the handle shape. Now I am going to talk a little bit more about the handle in my kind of feedback section or things that I think could still be slightly improved. But overall, they kept this really nice, simple kind of slight curved handle, and it's a really great handle shape. So the thing that I like about a simple handle is that it really doesn't put your hand into a certain grip. You can hold this knife here like this if you're doing, kind of rolling cuts. You can hold it up here if you're, need to get up higher. You can pinch grip it, and you can kind of hammer grip it. And it works really well because it is a nice, simple, curved design. So I'm glad that they kept that handle shape overall. I also am glad that they kept the drop point. This blade shape is super classic. I mean, it doesn't get too much more classic than this, and I think that it works well for pretty much all cutting. It's definitely one of my most preferred blade shapes. But and also the grind is very well done seaming on this. It cuts well. Hopefully, yeah, you can see it comes down to a nice thin thickness behind the edge. And I think, to be honest, maybe even a little bit thinner than the V3, although I did not, use calipers to measure it. So I like that. And then another thing that I like is that it's actually pretty much the same price, the same great value, which I will again talk about towards the end of this. So real quick, I wanted to give some size comparisons on this because it fits in really well with a lot of the most popular EDC knives out there. So here is it, and I will show first the Benchmade full-size Griptilian. So we'll go clip side so that it sits a little flatter. You can see that the V5 is a little bit shorter than the Griptilian, but like very close in length. Definitely in the same size range. And then a Spyderco Endura, another classic EDC. The Endura is a little longer than the Griptilian and definitely a little longer than the Model 1, but in the same range, I would say. 3.5 to 4 inch type range, 3.25 to 4 inch. Really, I like 3.25 to 3.75 inch generally, although I definitely, I'm okay with knives that go longer than that and shorter. But here is the Rat 1, again, right around 3.5 inch blade. So you can see it's a little longer than the Model 1, but same size range. And speaking of that, it does have a 3.25 inch blade. It has a ceramic detent bowl, something that it kept, which I forgot to mention, and it's 4.67 inches long when closed. So like I say, it really does fit into that EDC size that a lot of people like. So I think it's a great design. Now, in my original video, like I said, I had some feedback, some things that I think, might be able to be improved. And I want to emphasize before I get into that on this knife, that I think this is a great knife. I think the previous knife was a really great knife, and I think that this one is a great one also. I think it's a really good value in its current design, especially for the price. I definitely would be happy with this knife if I had bought it. I in fact think that this is one of those knives and one of those companies that people should be looking out for and more excited about. Sometimes these small, mid-tech type companies get a knife that gets super popular, and then they, start selling them for twice or 3 or 4 times as much, and they're super hard to get. And sometimes those designs, to me, I don't get the hype for them. But this one, I think, is worthy of it. So I'm just kind of waiting for that to happen. So I do think this design as it stands is a really, really nice knife. But there's 2 main things that I think could make this knife pretty much a perfect knife for me. A knife that I could carry pretty much all the time without wanting anything else on it. The first thing I'm going to talk about is basically just a very small machining thing on this cutout. So like I said, I thought that this needed a little bit more of a cutout to get at the lock bar. And I think that it was a good addition to put it. The only thing is I think that this corner, the angle, the direction of this corner could be changed slightly. So what I mean by that is this, the radius of this cutout could be opened up a little bit so that instead of this corner pointing downwards toward where your finger is, it could be pointing a little bit more upwards. So basically just open this up so that instead of continuing to turn here, it goes up more towards the top part of the flipper tab. And the main place where it matters that I noticed is actually on the back side. As you can see, because there is less of a cutout, your finger does kind of sit right on that corner. You don't notice it in normal use, especially when you actually use a knife, most of the use, you use it like this, in my experience. But when I was using the knife like this, particularly, I think I remember I was cutting something and had to kind of push hard on it. And I did feel this corner here. So again, it's one of those things where I think a lot of people might not even notice it. But for me, in using it, this corner, and you can see there how it actually, points away from the flipper tab so that the flipper tab isn't kind of protecting that your finger from that corner. So I think if they, again, just kind of made this radius point more towards this point, the like guard of the handle or the top of the handle where it turns to go around, again, pointing more towards here rather than here, the top of the flipper versus the bottom, I think that would pretty much alleviate that. And I sent, a video of with some of this feedback to Michael Martin, and he said that was something that, probably isn't a huge deal. So I don't know if that's something that he'll consider for future models or not, but it's one of the things that I noticed, and I think it's one of the things that come about when you're willing to, take feedback and try new things, is that, you're going to have to constantly improve them. For example, Spyderco uses the term constant quality improvement. I'm pretty sure that's it, CQI. And in that, sometimes every now and then an improvement will, bring light to or shed light on something else that might be able to be done a little bit more perfectly. And I think that this, would help out with that. Now, another thing that would help with that, and an interesting thing that might be a little bit more, and I'm not sure it's exactly the kind of feedback changing the design that Michael Martin was looking for, but something I thought of here is that every now and then, especially when I first got this, because the flipper is a little shorter and a little wider, I have slipped off of it before. Part of that being because it does have a really, really strong, snappy detent. So you do want to make sure that you do a pure light switch style flipper action. So on flippers, you can either have light switch where it's pulling straight down. You notice my finger goes from here all the way down to here. Or you can have a push button where you pretty much are just pushing straight down. In my experience, more are the light switch style. It's more common, but some do kind of go both, have a little bit of both. And I think that he could do that because to make that happen, you notice that this flipper tab comes straight out from the pivot. That means if I push straight down on the flipper tab, it doesn't do anything to break the detent because I'm pushing into the pivot rather than turning the blade or rotating the blade. So to make it be able to use both a push button and a light switch, you would move it down slightly. And I don't certainly not suggesting to move it down far enough that it would make the light switch style flipping more difficult. I think just moving it down slightly would allow a little bit more for both types of action. So if you move this down in this position, what that would actually do is move it up in this position so that you could get a little bit more, usable grip area out of the handle. So it would move up slightly and would bring this flipper tab a little bit more in line with the top of the handle here. So again, something that I'm not sure if, it's the kind of feedback he's looking for, but one thing that, I noticed is making sure that I do the pure light switch style flipping action. I thought about the fact that you could drop this flipper tab down ever so slightly, especially since it is a little shorter now and wider, and it would allow for a little bit maybe like of a mixed or combination action. And then it would also move this flipper tab up some so that you could kind of round that radius of that cutout and have it still fit in line with this flipper tab. Now, one thing I did remember about the V3 is that I found because this flipper tab is pretty long on this knife, which it definitely is pretty long, and there's a good amount of space between the flipper tab and the edge, you can reach up and use this almost like a sub hilt, like it's kind of like a choil or more like a sub hilt to hold on to while you're using it. And if the flipper tab was moved up, it would make that a little bit more difficult. It actually is already a little bit more difficult because the flipper tab is shorter, but you can do it. If it was moved up for me, especially because I have kind of thicker fingers, it would be a little bit more difficult to do that. So again, one of those things where improving one thing might, take away one of the kind of sub features. But like I said, those are just those two, areas of feedback, slight ideas that I had that for me might take this knife from a really great knife to pretty much a perfect knife. So those are kind of my thoughts on it. And in conclusion, again, I think that this is a great value. It is an American-made knife, pretty much 100%, made in-house, pretty close to at least 100% made in-house. At American Blade Works, pretty much by one person, and so it's a true mid-tech. There are a lot of knives out there that claim mid-tech, and it's kind of a continuum, but this is definitely, no questions, a mid-tech. And it has good materials, like I said, G10. There's also micarta and carbon fiber options for the handles, and the blade, just like the V3, is S35 VN. So with all that, I think that the price on these is really fair. So this G10 version, as well as some other versions, are $185. I believe the micartas are also $185. And then the carbon fiber can go up to like $210 with the fancy like shredded carbon fiber and things like that. But these versions are $185. So, to compare what other knives are in that price range, there are, a lot of Spydercos, factory made, really mass produced knives at that range. Certainly zero tolerance knives are usually higher than that in price. A lot of Benchmades are right around that price or even higher. So those are kind of like the big companies that are making a lot of knives with really similar features, similar materials, but with less of that really, I think, cool and unique focus on building the best knife that they can. Not that, Spyderco, Cold Steel, or Benchmade, zero tolerance aren't trying to build the best knives they can. But Michael Martin is an individual who is really taking the time to get feedback and to try and improve his products and make the best possible product. And I think that there's value in that. And that's not even considering the fact that it is American made and pretty much made in-house, which I know a lot of people really value. So considering all that, I think that it is a really great value. I think that it's a knife where at any point I can see, it just kind of hitting the big, like, some other mid-tech type knives. I'm sure you probably know what I'm talking about, but, the Grimsmo, or however you say it, Norseman, is an older example. The Three Rivers Adam, I think it was, is one. Then the Skaha, I think, the North something knives, the Skaha, and I haven't had any of those knives because they jump up in price. So I could see that happening here to these knives at any point. And I think that it would be a fair thing for him to, charge more than he does. So I do suggest trying an American Blade Works Model 1, whatever version is available, really. This is the V5. He's had different versions of this. I know that there are new versions that I can't exactly give the details on coming. And so I would definitely suggest getting on the email list on his site, following on Instagram, and keeping an eye out and trying one of these knives, because I think it's a really nice knife and a great value and a company to watch. So if you've enjoyed this video, definitely like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications so you know when I post new videos. Also, check out my social media at Instagram, Facebook, everything like that at Knife Thoughts, and my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And one last time, a really big thank you to Michael Martin for sending this knife along. I really do appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed getting to check it out. And last but not least, don't forget to go out and do good.